Jake and myself will answer any questions that you have that we can. And if we cannot answer the questions, we'll follow up with you with the answer as best we can find it. So what we'll do is just take a look at our chat. You can raise your hand or just unmute your microphone to ask questions. And we're going to be focused mainly on creating visualizations, implementation, tools that we use that are focused on the things that are important to you. We're recording this session, so again, we'll send this out as a follow-up, probably edit out some things. Just that's how things work, you know it. But again, we appreciate your engagement. If you feel like, wow, you know, I got what I needed, then please feel free to drop off if you want to, or if you need to go grab somebody, say, hey, you had a really great question. I think that, yeah, do that. So we'll just go ahead. Jake, did you have anything you wanted to?
No, I think just waiting to hear the questions. Excited to continue the conversation.
All right, sweet. Anybody feeling like being the first person to step forward and ask a question that's important to you or somebody in your environment? So one thing that I've found, Jake, is that the templates that we talked about are, you know, not something that we'd explore because we haven't had so many people like developing things. Mm-hmm. So that's an Ask Me. It's just a filler right now, I guess. Some banter. But no, what's really cool is that so when you do that template, you put all those things in there predefined, like colors and all that other stuff, and then people just build from that. They already have some fact tables already. So I did see somebody unmute.
Yep, that was me. So Dr. Dave Maddock with School District of Osceola County.
All right.
So I've been working with Power BI. It was my my pandemic learning how to code and building a report. And we now have a relatively robust system that filters in and out about 850 million data points updated daily. But my question for you is, how do you contingency plan for making those systems sustainable if, say, like someone were to leave? Because there's a lot of DAX built into that. There's a lot of logic built into the various files coming out of different SQL systems and other data integrations. As you said before, that like buffet of desserts, and it would be very difficult, I think, for someone to pick up my work and continue on. So how do you plan for that? How do you institutionalize that?
Awesome, great question. So you had mentioned DAX. So we do use Power BI as our reporting platform. So you know, the languages that we use for that are M language, SQL, and DAX. And DAX is that data analysis expressions. It is complicated. It's different from anything that that you've used with like Excel. It looks a little bit similar. So what we've been doing is anybody that's building reports, we're teaching them about measures. We're doing some internal learning just on, to create this report, you need to do a measure. Oh, okay, well then how do we create measures? Well, there's a language, and so like it's a progressive kind of flow. Using analysis services and publishing like version control helps, so that like if we need to pick it up and somebody can interpret the code, we can do that. But yeah, sustainability is going to be an issue, especially as you have some more targeted types of knowledge. But we have a small team, and being part of the collaborative, we're able to create artifacts and put those in what's called the marketplace in the FI Exchange, and people can pull down those projects. And then by having good documentation, yeah, if someone, you know, if David, you were to disappear and win $1 million, actually I think it's more like $1 billion now, right? Because $1 million's kind of like, yeah, you're $1 million. But if you had like $1 billion and you went somewhere else and you just dropped everything, they couldn't replace you right away. But having good documentation, having a strong professional learning or skills training program for those people who support the work will make it less bad if it happens. I don't know if that helped or confused things, David.
It helps. It's convincing people to try to find the time to learn.
Exactly. Yeah,
and
like,
get the motivation too. I think once they start to see some of the value in the output, and it's sort of developed into a web app now where we've got a pop-up filter tray with about 26 demographic slicers that you can apply across any page. So if you want to jump from seeing test scores to seeing scholarships for just African American ESE students, that's pretty quick and easy to transition. So I think as they see the value in that, there's a little bit more interest, but convincing someone to even sit down for an hour just to learn how to connect a data port is a challenge.
Yeah, and we're playing around with like some promoted data sets. So as we're out of dev and we have a stable, easily, we have a good semantic filter so people can understand it and build reports. Then we just have the data set with the measures already built into it. Like I was talking with Jake, totally unrelated to this, about templates. Then you can share that measure with them. They may not be able to like out the gate understand it, but being able to play with it in a failure-free environment can be helpful too. So, thank you. Any other questions or follow-ups?
Denise, I see that you are unmuted. Did you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I apologize.
I was excited because I was trying to figure out how I could pronounce your name if you had a question. And I was like, hoping that you would say it.
That's
Just like it sounds.
Cantalupo?
Yes.
That's like a wolf song, isn't it? Like.
It means singing wolf. Yes.
All right, very cool. Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you.
So yeah, there are a lot of different tools out there that you can use. Having those conversations before you start developing things are helpful. But just like Power BI, because it's Microsoft, because we use SQL, because we use DAX, because all of these different, it just makes logical sense. It's more scalable than some of the other solutions, and you really only use what you need for it, but it provides a lot of flexibility for reports and dashboards and visuals. And plus, every month they release new stuff. So I always feel like I'm learning new things. You don't ever feel stagnant because always new functions coming out. And then there's a great community of Power BI users in the state of Florida. There's Power BI user group, but then also in our collaborative, we do professional learning and also some thought partnering with our collaborative members. It's great, man. We could turn this into like a GIF, like when we get all this done, we'll cut out like all of it. It'll just be like this. If it's like, hey, I have a question, and then there's some rambling answer, and then we can do it again. Some things that you may look at too is if you're just trying to get some fire, get people excited about visualizations, you can do that with just like downloading Power BI, and you can connect it to an Excel or a CSV or a PDF. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can connect it. It's free to use for your own personal use, but when you publish it, it requires some licensing. What you can do is kind of like, I don't know, the great value way of sharing your report. And basically you can put it in the data source files in, a network sharing area, and then all the things are in the project, so they can open it up and they can look at the visuals that you've created. All of their access is inherited by you giving them access to that folder, and then they'll be able to see those data sources and play with the report. As soon as you publish it, that report changes a little bit to where they'll need like logins and things like that. So those are just some considerations if you're going to do some rapid prototyping. Google has some visualization tools. They work really great. They're not as scalable as some other solutions, but but then the Gartner quadrants, the magic quadrants, seeing which visualization tools are out there. And some of the ones you'll hear all the time are like Tableau, Power BI, Click, Data Studio. There's lots of different ones out there, but that's just the one that we use.
Okay, I've got another question for you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So I live in Power BI these days, so how do you build data-mindedness within the people who utilize your reports? Because we've got a lot of really powerful reports. For example, we've got one fresh off the presses that shows their demographic enrollment for equity in all their courses, and then the student ethnicity for all of their requests for next year, so they can see the differences. It'll highlight the differences between the percent of ethnicity of students who request advanced coursework versus the percent who get enrolled, with a couple active pie charts. So how do you build that data intuition in the people that you work with to help them think like, well, if I were to slice this out by, let's say, a grade level, I'd be seeing something different than if I were to slice this out by, let's say, free or reduced lunch?
Okay.
Yeah, I think some of that starts with the visualization itself, and I kind of see this whole process in two separate steps. One of them I really have no idea how it works, and then one of them is the part that I do, and I kind of know how that works. But then when you get to actually doing the visualizing, once the data is in your database, or you're pulling from the operational data store, wherever that's at, and there's a model that exists that we can start visualizing from. I think keeping the user, keeping the stakeholder, whoever that's going to be, if they're classroom teachers or coaches, district admin, school admin, and the tech background and comfortability they have, the mathematics and data, sort of data and interpretive skills that they have, keeping all of that in mind when you're actually creating the visualization, when you're visualizing that data, and knowing that if this source that I'm working from and what I'm trying to visualize here is student achievement data, maybe it's overall public, maybe it's specific down to the student level, whatever it is, if I'm going to have a 28-year veteran third grade teacher looking at this data, that what they're bringing to the table is very unique and very specific, compared to maybe a brand new teacher who has more tech skills and maybe a better data science background as far as that goes. So keeping the really wide array of stakeholders in mind that are going to be interacting with the data is really important, so that when they are interacting with the data, when they are reading that data, making those inferences, trying to make those database decisions, the visual itself isn't getting in the way, and the interaction of the tool isn't getting in the way of understanding. So that's kind of step one. But then step two is having sort of specific time blocked off in professional learning, professional development, looking at the data, looking at the visuals together, asking questions together, answering questions together. We at NEFEC and in the instructional department, we treat the data visualizations as sort of a core and key component of all of the regional professional learning we do. If we're doing regional professional learning, we're starting with data. We're starting somehow in one of the data tools that we've developed, and we treat that piece of our professional learning exactly like we treat, if it's a mathematics professional learning and we're looking at standards, and we're trying to break that down and look at content, and there's tons of intentionality to how we develop that piece of the professional learning. We treat the data portion of that professional learning as the same way, because we do realize there is a gap in sort of the data science competence across all stakeholders in education, where some are very equipped and some aren't. And that's not to say good or bad for anyone in that continuum of, data, data skill, data reading skill, data competence. But we recognize there is that gap, and so we treat it with intentionality and professional learning. Plenty of time to play, plenty of time to discuss. We always prepare sort of scaffolded questions, what we think are the important questions to be asking of the data and the important decisions that can be made because of the data. We kind of know all of that going in and are very intentional through professional learning when we're using those resources.
Yeah, and all of that, making it part of the service, making it part of it makes people a little bit more data minded.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that we do, well, part of what I do is with my visuals, I might create the report with all of those things pre-done. So depending on the level of user, I might embed the report that Julia and I create. I might embed a report and not show any filters or not show any tabs, and then just control what view they see based on what the focus group or the use case has. So if I'm just wanting them to look at demographic information, okay, let's just look at, students well, then I would carry whatever filter I wanted over to that visual, through like a button. And then their cognitive load is seeing what's presented in front of them and acting upon it. And not in, okay, well, I got to reset these filters. And then knowing that you also have different levels of users. So we might have one report that we share out through the service. We might have one that we share out in an embedded report. So it's like just in a regular page. And we might have one that we have as a web page by itself that brings over credentials from something else for like secure reports. Another thing that is your use of tooltips. So you can use tooltips to explain, certain elements on your page, and even just having a help page in your report that they can reference for how to adjust a slicer, how to reset filters, those things, but making it as simple as possible so they're not sitting on the end of the tree branch, sawing off the tree branch that's sitting on the thing that's going to fall, right? So a lot of it is understanding it, getting them to use it, but then sometimes you just got to save them from hurting themselves and, maybe curate that view a little bit better.
Yeah, and I like that perspective of how many barriers can we remove so that if the stakeholder is on the lower end of the, tech competence or data science, inferencing ability, that's the only thing that they have to worry about is the data, reading the data and making decisions. If we take everything else away, then we can focus on teaching those skills and helping educators, move towards being able to do that.
Great question. Are there some things that you're doing right now, David, that you'd like to share back with us? Things that have been successful or unsuccessful?
Sure. So the reason this came about is because we have a large process in Osceola. If you're part of Impact Florida or any of those other leadership organizations, you may have heard of this, but we do a process called stock take, wherein all the leadership teams at a school site on a monthly basis have to review the data in a pretty systematic way and compare it towards their goals, and then try to find specific, as you said earlier, low-hanging fruit, come up with a plan. If we're 15% off in our goal towards where we want to be with ELA, what are the interventions that we're giving our kids? And then they can go into that more process thinking. But so that's one of the things that we've worked on, is that they're trying to engage with this platform now, this data, we call it the stock take platform. They're trying to engage with it on a monthly basis and see their changes over time and review that data regularly. And that gives me a chance to, in between, try to get with them and say, well, have you thought about looking at it this way? Have you thought about slicing out your data based on ESSA subgroups for ethnicity? So I think systematizing the times at which they will have to access the data. Of course, they can go in more often, but finding, systematic ways of doing that has been helpful for us.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, do you get a lot of usage out of the reports, like in between those times, or is it just kind of hit and miss?
It gets used fairly often. Let me load the usage metrics real quick because I've got it open right here. It's been viewed 4,300 times today.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Yeah, the new reporting features for like how they're interacting with the reports, that's been helpful, because then you can tell if like somebody hasn't logged in for a while, you might reach out to them. They might be, hey man, I just forgot my password. I wasn't sure who to contact,
It is very useful for us in like identifying like the like data-minded leaders throughout the district. You can see like, oh wow, this person's spending a lot of time looking at these pages, and that's pretty useful. I will say it drives me up a wall that their metrics are only 90 days though. I have to keep downloading those and archiving them to get a whole school year.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of data points.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned, there's some like I guess early adopters or like key users. Something else that we've done also through the lens of some of the professional learning is we've seen a few times now across our region some districts that have had sort of anomalous spikes in growth or achievement. Something has happened, and just through conversation and through the relationships we've had, we've learned that some of that they attribute back to using the resources that we have developed, the data visualizations we've developed in their PLCs and things, and how they've used them. And then rather than us try to communicate that out to the rest of the districts or the rest of sort of the partners that are in these projects with us, we just allow them to have a voice. And so, I can recall, I think it was last summer or the summer before, COVID has messed up my timeline way too much. We had one district in particular that in one area of their school grade, there was just tons of growth. And they kind of came to us and said, hey, we noticed this and this visualization you provided, and so we really focused on it, and here's how we use the tool. And then so we gave them a platform with the rest of the districts, and they talked about how they used the resource in the PLC to sort of that intentional manner, and how the decisions that they made impacted what was happening in the classroom, which in turn impacted student achievement. And so using kind of a real example of how that was adopted and used and then benefited classrooms sort of gave us another way to speak to the importance of that intentionality, and it gave another voice. It gave another voice, and not just the importance to use it, but how to use the tools as well. And I think it was received very well, since it wasn't coming from us. It was coming from classroom teachers and district coaches, because those are the exact stakeholders and users we want interacting. And so finding those early adopters, finding the success stories, and letting them have the voice, letting them share how and why they're using it and what's working.
I know I get excited every time I see like movement.
Yeah. Tracy, I see that you're unmuted. You have a question for us?
Oh look, Dustin Ryan, SQL Dusty is on. Hey Dustin, he's been a great partner.
Yes.
Hey, I hope we've done you proud.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it so far, and it's exciting to see, so many folks on the summit today.
Yeah, it's growing pretty well, and like the members that we have right now, we're starting to create and collaborate, and we're getting to a really good critical mass, I think. Do you have any like updates for us about things that you've seen that have been successful throughout the country or pre this time, but then even like, during these remote work sessions and school closings and that sort of thing. Is there anything that you can share with us?
Yeah, definitely. I had a question for you first.
Oh,
And you know, I've seen some of the Power BI visualizations that you guys have built, and kind of have seen how they've matured and grown over the years, and you guys have really come a long way and are doing some very cool things. But I'm interested to also kind of know, what is the future vision for what you're looking to do with data, with Florida Code and the data standard, and then how are you looking to build in more advanced analytics capabilities, maybe predictive analytics, and take advantage of some of the artificial intelligence and ML capabilities that are being built into the Power Platform. And the reason I asked the question, just to kind of give some context to that, this is a big area of investment for the Power BI product team at Microsoft. They're looking to do things like democratize machine learning and artificial intelligence, so that a district doesn't have to have a data scientist or a researcher or somebody that can write a truckload of Python just
right.
for some sort of advanced analytics report.
Yeah. So our biggest thing, I think, that we see in the future is updating our data store to include like all elements of like the staff domain, because that's an area that we even like historically that we haven't had a lot of information on, be able to look at it compared to like student outcomes or professional learning outcomes. So we're fleshing that out, and that will also allow us to include some teacher preparation, like from the time that that person decides they want to be a teacher to the time that they retire, capturing those elements in the district, that are important, to make some decisions. So expanding out the staff domain, and then connecting a lot of these disparate sources that we have in Florida. So like we have some special education systems, and then we have like some federal reporting systems, and then like some project or program specific things, and connecting those things, of those disparate sources, is going to be a lot of work for us moving forward, so that we can answer any types of questions from whatever dimension we're looking at. I think that AI and machine learning will help with some of that stuff, like in the future. I don't know right now. It's our analytics for VAM, I think, are going to be the most intense thing that we've done on analysis services, because mainly what we're doing is just like, show me the records that belong to this student. We're not doing like any predictive modeling right now, but I think as we get more information in, and there's more of a use case for it, that we will be able to do that. Our biggest thing is, man, if they can make sharing easier for us, that would be awesome, Justin. That's probably our biggest hiccup, because we're able to provide a lot of things, but if they're not like a Microsoft district, then sharing has been a little bit of an issue. But yeah, that's our main thing, and then capturing all of those assessments that we use in our schools to determine if the student's making progress, and display them in ways that are intuitive, make logical connections, and help people make data-based decisions, data-informed decisions without the wrong conclusions. So I don't know if that helped at all or confused things even more.
No, that's good. That makes sense. One of the areas that I've been spending a lot of time working on has been around helping districts, bring together lots of different types of data into scalable analytics platforms. And so just kind of being in the role that I'm in, as a data specialist for education in the US, I get to work with everybody in the US. And so I've worked with projects on very, very small school districts, and I've worked on projects with all the big school districts in Florida, New York City DOE, Houston ISD. I mean, these really, really massive school districts that have really unique data challenges, you know, when you think about volume like that. And one of the areas that's been a huge focus, and I think that, you know, what has happened over the past year and a half or so kind of jump-started all this is having a place to bring together engagement data, right? That student engagement data. And if you're a school district that maybe is using, you know, multiple platforms for collaboration, you know, we have customers that, you know, they might run Teams, but they also have some people that run Zoom. They might have, you know, work with other folks that are using Google Classroom. And so you've got like these multiple platforms and lots of different places to bring to if you wanted to measure what student and what teacher engagement looks like on those platforms, you'd have to go to a lot of different places to get that data. And then to get it in a reliable way is really, really difficult. And so that's been an area where, you know, we're seeing a lot of demand, and Power BI has been really, really helpful because it can connect to a lot of different data sources. And so like at the beginning of last year, I worked on a project with New York City DOE, and they're building a sort of an analytics ecosystem that Power BI sits on top of, where they pull data from Zoom, Google Classroom, Teams, D2L. They've got, you know, a couple dozen different LMSs that they use across the different districts in the DOE that they support, as well as a couple different SISs. And they bring all of that into Azure, where they do modeling and analytics on that data. And then Power BI is the presentation layer that sort of sits on top of that and democratizes just the distribution of the information. It's been really, really cool to kind of see, you know, although the pandemic has been terrible and there's been, you know, real tragedy in the midst of that thing. But, you know, even through the midst of that, I think, you know, a lot of our customers and a lot of the districts that we're working with have persevered, have done some really cool things with data to help their students and help the families of their students, and kind of ease that process, even though the pandemic has really sucked.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing all that. That's pretty awesome. So like, not only is it kind of a central hub, but then do you, like on that platform, is there secure information, publicly available information, gray area stuff? How is it like segmented out to share?
Yeah, so there is PII on the New York City DOE platform. They do have PII there. I'm not aware of them making it any of that publicly available. I know that's some things that one of the things that's on the roadmap for them is to be able to share that data with students. I don't know if they've got to, you know, if they've got to that point yet where they actually can have a student or a parent log in and get secure access to their students' information. But that's been another area where we've seen a lot of demand is asking students and parents to like take ownership of their data, right? To understand like, hey, where is your student at? Are they participating? Are they on track to graduate? What are the 3 leading risk factors that may indicate that they're not going to finish on time? Or what are the 3 things that they're doing really well and they need to continue to do really well, right? Making that data available and letting the students and parents own that data, and own their, you know, their journey through their educational career. That's one of the things that's on their roadmap. I think right now, it's been mostly, you know, a lot of this data, they just haven't been able to look at.
Right.
You know, they've known it's out there, they just haven't been able to take advantage of it. And that's been really, really challenging for them when you're trying to be data driven. You got to kind of have data to do that. And so now that they've got a way to get access to the data, and are able to use the tools to view that data, to bring it all together into one place so that they can ask questions they've never been able to ask, has been really, really transformational for them.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, that's really neat. Like so one point of clarification, I think, is that like you don't need the operational data store to like visualize. It just makes everything so much easier. Like security's already built. Yeah. But there are needs too that you might have to include, like maybe some survey information, and that's not in the data store, or some evaluation information or some student feedback or whatever. So you can create all of those things in the data store, but then you can add supplemental things to it. You know, and that's what I think is really powerful, is that it's not just structured data that you're looking at any manner of things. You could be looking at video, you could be looking at audio stuff or images. I mean, so when you think data visualization, yeah, it's kind of like everything. Even a
Yeah,
spreadsheet could be
like the idea of like the ODS, right? The operational data store, is it's like a cornerstone, right? It's not the entire house, but it's like that I think of it as like that cornerstone, right? Foundational element that can enable all of the other things that you might want to do with data, right? And before you can start really being effective with data-driven decision making, first you have to be able to get the data into a single place, keep it up to date, and store it in a format that's optimized for analytics. Um, and you know, some of the platforms that are out there, you know, whether it's your ERP or SIS or LMSs or HR or whatever it looks like, right? They have some analytics built in. A lot of those platforms have analytics built into them, right? But the downfall is that it only gives you visibility into that one little piece of you know your data estate, right? And to be truly data driven, you need to be able to bring all of that data into a place and optimize it for analytics. It's like the difference between like buying like a Honda Civic, right, that you're going to use to commute back and forth to work. But what you really need is like a monster truck, right, that can drive over mud and through the woods, right, and all those kinds of things. And while at the end they're both vehicles, right, what you need is something that is optimized for analytics, right? And so that's the value of having something like an ODS as part of like a wider analytics platform, because it's optimized for the unique requirements of building an analytics ecosystem to enable data-driven decision making.
awesome. I like the cornerstone analogy. I might have to steal that one from me, Dustin.
A quarter every time you mention it.
Yeah, a quarter. That's like half my salary. What's going on? Yeah, I think that's you know, all of those points are really cool, because like you had mentioned democratizing. So it's like we want to make sure that everybody there's like some conditions for success. Like it has to be secure. That's rule number one.
Right.
Thing's secure. And then it has to be structured in some way that we can interact with it. And then the tool that we select needs to be like scalable, secure, you know, operate independently of other systems in case we have to, you know, replace whatever tool we use, and then powerful enough, but not too powerful. So like we could like, you know, monster truck, and then, you know, somebody comes in with, I don't know, an AVLB or something like massive military vehicles. Like I don't need that, but I definitely don't need a scooter. But selecting the right size fit, especially when you're trying to make the case for the need. Yeah, because that's a little less cumbersome, and you can iterate a lot quicker.
I definitely have an example of over providing.
Oh, sweet.
Past the monster truck if you want that.
Yeah.
So my actual role, I'm a researcher and statistician, and spend a lot of time in predictive analytics for research purposes outside of, you know, having learned coding and setting up Power BI for the district. But at one point, I thought it would be really cool to provide through the machine learning platform that Microsoft has with the Azure stuff. All of our kids take a social emotional survey through something called Panorama. And they all take, we use the NWEA measurement of achievement progress assessment this year in the stead of the Florida Standards assessment. So I thought it would be really cool to make like a predictive regression to determine what social emotional indicators are associated with higher performance, and what all the principals found. The machine learning kept highlighting like, well, if your kids were less socially aware and talk to each other less often, they'll start doing better in mathematics. They were really highlighting kind of the wrong thing and not a message that we wanted to send out. But because I was doing it through that KPI plugin that they've got in Power BI, they were seeing it without me knowing that that's what they were seeing. So it ended up sparking some conversation. So definitely think about what the outputs are and grab some use cases and have some people run through some samples before you launch a page. Because I did that. I was like, oh, it's ready, and I'll iterate on it later. And it sparked some things overnight.
Well, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that just because you can doesn't mean you should sometimes. And you're like, man, it would be really cool if I did this. They didn't ask for it, but let me go ahead and do this. Yeah, I'm 100% of the time just say no, write it down, record it, and then ask them. I'm like, okay, hey, I had a little bit of time left on this, and I noticed, would this be helpful? Oh no, we already have too much on the plate right now. Let's just go. Or wow, that's awesome. But always putting that, the focus group or whoever's helping you develop that report in control, so that they get what they ask for, nothing more, nothing less, but what they need to do the work. It makes you less crazy with maintenance of the models too.
Yeah, very much so. And I do want to say, for anyone who hasn't started on this adventure yet, we're still in the process of standing up an FLCODE. We started that back in September. It'll probably be more of a 2022 project for us, honestly. But I got started with just one report out of our SIS and one report from NWEA, and they were Excel files that were getting copy and paste updated ETL style that was at least allowing me to put, here's the kids who are on digital learning and here's the kids who are in the classroom, and you can now click to see the differences between their test scores, just so you can track right at the beginning when we're coming back from the pandemic how your digital kids are doing. So even if you don't have a SQL base, or I've got this horrendous star schema now. It's like a twin star schema that revolves around the stuff that's on the old format and the stuff's coming in from SQL, and it's just a wonderful schema. But just getting started importing, as long as your columns make sense and your rows are, student level row context, you can get in there and just start producing some easy school level reports. And I'm really helping a lot of our coaches with that now, is like, well, if you just want to look at your teacher's report cards, here's how you can pull that out and make a quick 3-column report to compare and slice in a couple demographic ways.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's things that matter, and you're showing the value of it. You're making your life easier, so you don't have like all of these, pivots and all this other things that people do to interact with Excel. But then I think that another cool thing you mentioned is like you're starting this. Like you don't have a stood up ODS. You're learning all those things you need to make your work easier in the long term. But yeah, I think all of those things are really good points. I've got some notes down here, so I'm probably going to be bugging you, David. And sure, anybody here is welcome to send me any questions that they have after this, or any comments. Also happy to be a thought partner. If you're working on a report, or if you see a report on our visualizations, you want to talk about it. We have a really great team here. Ask to meet, then we'll get the transformational team together, so people from different perspectives to talk about how it impacts their work and some of the key decision points along the way. Which I think it's really valuable work, and I think it's involving cross-functional transformational teams that are focused on specific elements that are important. I think that's the best way to get a sustainable and trustworthy reporting system, because they have to trust it. It's 35.2 and they're expecting to see 35.3, especially if they're a math person, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Very cool. So I think we made it through our Ask Me Anything. Got some really good feedback about some things that are working nationwide. And you can look down the participant list, and also we'll send this recording and the presentation from our first session out so that you can refer to these things. But please, let's keep the conversation going. As you have more questions or just want to chat about something, please feel free to reach out to me. Information's there, and we'll also give it to you as well. And there will be a survey that's sent out. We'll encourage you to fill that out. It's like maybe 2 minutes, but it gives us some good information. So is there anything else before we wrap up? All right, y'all enjoy your day, and thank you so much for your time and attention. I look forward to speaking with you in the future.